Hello, everyone. We're Team 3, consisting of James Kim, Howard Jung, Louisa Kim, Justin Kim, and Andrew Kim, and we'll be presenting factors that impact video game player counts.
To begin, video gaming is a thriving industry with an active community of over 3.1 billion gamers around the globe. Especially thanks to COVID and lockdowns, with the entire world stuck at home, gaming has boomed, leading to the rising popularity of streaming sites like Twitch, with thousands of streamers entertaining people bored at home. For those of you who don't know, Twitch is a website that allows entertainers to stream a multitude of things, like games, where viewers can watch. People can also host large events like esports tournaments for people to watch on Twitch too. What's interesting about this is that it seems like there's a direct correlation between Twitch viewership and game player counts. With this in mind, let's go to our hypothesis. Our hypothesis being that the viewership of a game on Twitch at a certain time directly correlates with how many active players that game has at that same time.
For our project, we used multiple datasets, all coming from either Kaggle, Tracker Network, or Steam Charts, which keeps track of the official player counts of the game hosted on the service Steam. As for the tools, we used Google Sheets to clean and pre-process all of our data, Google Colab to graph and accomplish all sorts of data analysis on the datasets, and 4 Python libraries. Pandas, regex, and numpy were used to process the data, while matplotlib was used to visualize the data.
So originally, there were 8 separate datasets. One that represented the top 200 games on Twitch from 2016 to 2023, and 7 other datasets, each of which corresponded to a game we were going to do an analysis on. The contents from the 7 datasets were all scraped together on spreadsheets to form one major dataset, and from there, we split the Twitch dataset into their own years. The reason we did that was so that we could perform more specific data analysis on a specific year or parts of a year that we wanted. We also had to clean out commas in our dataset's numbers using regex, assuring that matplotlib can process and graph the data.
So one of the first factors we looked into that affects the player count of viewership was seasonal changes. So one of the seasons that we noticed had a large change was the summer season. So as we can see on the graphs up to the right, we see that in the months of August, the player count has a large spike, which actually is the peak of the entire year, while the Twitch viewership has a large decrease, which is one of the lowest viewerships for the year. These changes are most likely caused due to school summer breaks, where people are more likely to play with their friends who have more free time compared to watching Twitch streams, which are often used to pass time when you're alone and don't have other people to play with. There's another factor that must be considered, however. The Asian player base must also be considered as a common trend throughout all games and all years, as a large jump in players during the month of December and January occurred throughout almost every game throughout every year. This is most likely due to the Asian countries having a larger winter break compared to winter break in America and other holidays such as Lunar New Year. Coupling this with winter breaks in America and European countries explains why December and January often have the highest player counts of a game.
Some games, typically those of the multiplayer sector, had massive spikes in viewership during rather irregular months. After some research, we found that this was primarily caused by major esports tournaments that were occurring. For example, the game Dota 2 had its 2017 edition of its major esports tournament, the International, in August. This was reflected on the graph as August, highlighted by the red circle, had a considerable spike in viewership in Dota 2 as many people tuned in to watch their favorite esports teams compete. After the tournament concluded, viewership returned back to normal levels. While the International was taking place, Dota 2 saw a stark increase in player count during August of that same year. This implies that Dota 2's esports tournaments, such as the International, increased the game's popularity as many players not only tuned in to watch esports, but they also played it simultaneously. Potential explanation for the sudden increase in popularity is the massive amounts of excitement and hype that surround large, prestigious events like esports tournaments. Now for game updates. Single-player games typically were impacted more by the success of their game updates compared to multiplayer games. Although that's not to say the popularity and performance of multiplayer games were independent of game updates, as single-player games typically don't feature massive esports tournaments such as the games mentioned before. The developers must be more creative in maintaining a player's interest. One way to do this is by frequently updating their game. For example, the game Rust, developed by Facepunch Studios, typically releases a Christmas update around every December. This update consists of new skins, items, characters, and other interesting events, but these constant game updates are what keep the appeal of the game for many players, as they tend to flock back towards the game when it receives new updates. For Rust, in our example, its player count in 2022 peaked in December, around when Facepunch Studios released its annual Christmas update. Consistent updates were vital for single-player games to retain their popularity among players.
So if you quickly take a look to the two graphs on the right, it becomes clear that a strong correlation exists between GTA 5's Twitch viewership and its player count. Our data analysis consistently demonstrates this relationship between viewership and player count for 90% of games throughout all years. However, it is important to note that certain anomalies do arise which contribute to the fluctuation of a game's popularity.
In conclusion, our hypothesis was supported by the data and our analysis. We found a clear, direct correlation between Twitch viewership and player counts in games. The more Twitch viewers a game has, the more players it tends to have. These Twitch viewers play a major role in contributing to the rise and fall of game player counts. However, through our analysis, we also found that other external factors, such as seasonal changes, large esport events, and game updates, also play a role in increases and decreases in both viewership and player count. Game developers can use this information to know how to keep their games thriving by supporting streamers and hosting events, while the general public can actively participate in streams, events, and updates to help support their favorite games, both leading to the overall growth and success of the gaming industry. Thank you for your time. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, thank you. And then, well, okay. So anybody has any questions? Nope. So mainly, and then your analysis is based on the viewer count, and then over time, right? In the year 2020.
Yes, it's based on both viewer counts and player counts.
Okay. And in the original data set, do you have something else?
So our data sets primarily consisted of two different data sets, which is one is for player counts, which was primarily collected through a third party called Steam. And then our viewer counts were collected from Twitch.
Okay. And then is there any more information about the viewers? So viewers and then players, are they same group or they can be different group?
Although they're technically two separate groups, they can overlap in which a person who can play the game can also have watched a stream about that game in that same month. So although they're two separate groups, they can overlap.
Okay. So if these groups can significantly overlap, then maybe your question itself is somewhat kind of, the easy question, right? So maybe, yeah, because, well, the players, they're gonna watch, most probably, right? So, yeah, and yeah, even though you are proving that, okay, hypothesis is true, but hypothesis itself is in some sense It's somewhat trivial hypothesis. What do you think? If
So-
I'm like that.
Yeah, so that is the case. So to answer the first thing you said, there is overlapping. For certain games, there is overlapping. There will be gamers that watch streams, but there are many different games where the watchers, the people that the viewer counts on streams completely are way bigger than the game counts. That
Mhm.
means there are tons of people that actually enjoy watching the game rather than playing it. And so the question itself is kind of trivial. It's very straightforward, but what we found throughout our data analysis is a lot more in depth than what the question originally is. We found many different factors, seasonal changes, right? Asian player base, esports tournaments, all those factors kind of play into why the game is so popular, and it can lead into much bigger things. So like later, you want to like you have a game, a very big game, and you have an esports tournament for it. That can really increase the game's popularity, especially among viewers and people that play it. So yeah, that's just all we had to say about it.
I see. Okay. So, but the experiment, in your experiment, you focus on just a couple of games, right? Not many.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we gathered information and data sets on a wide variety of games, but we picked few examples for the sake of time and brevity.
Okay. All right.
And like we also have tons of data, like a lot of different graphs if you want to take a look at that later.
Okay. All right. Any other questions by others? No? All right. Okay. Thank you so much.